I still remember the exact moment my heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. It wasn't in a hospital room. It wasn't at a funeral. It was at a candlelit table in the most expensive restaurant in town, with a white tablecloth beneath my trembling fingers and a glass of champagne I would never drink. The waitress had just approached our table. Young, beautiful, the kind of beautiful that makes you instinctively straighten your posture and smooth down your hair. She smiled at my husband first. They always smiled at him first, and asked if we were celebrating something special tonight. And my husband, the man I had loved for 15 years, the man I had built a life with, the man whose children I had carried in my body, looked at that waitress and said 5 words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. "She's just my nanny, just my nanny." 3 words that erased 15 years. 3 words that made me invisible. 3 words that told me exactly where I stood in my own marriage, which was apparently nowhere at all. I sat there frozen, my anniversary dress suddenly feeling like a costume, like I was playing a role in a play I never auditioned for. The waitress glanced at me with something that looked almost like pity, and I wanted to crawl under the table and disappear. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. But I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I did something that would change everything. I smiled, and I began to plan. But let me take you back. Let me show you who I was before that night, because you need to understand what I lost. You need to understand the woman who sat at that table, the woman who had given everything, the woman who was about to discover that everything she believed was built on lies. My name is Catherine, and for 15 years, I was the perfect wife. I don't say that with pride anymore. I say it with the bitter taste of ashes in my mouth, because being perfect meant nothing. Being perfect didn't protect me. Being perfect didn't make me visible. Being perfect was just another way of disappearing, of shrinking myself down until I fit into whatever shape my husband needed me to be. But I didn't know that then. Back then, I thought I was building something beautiful. I met Daniel when I was 23 years old, fresh out of college with a degree in interior design and dreams bigger than my bank account. He was 32, already established, already successful, already the kind of man who commanded attention when he walked into a room. He had dark hair that was just starting to gray at the temples, and eyes the color of storm clouds, and a smile that made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. I fell hard. I fell fast. I fell without looking where I was going. And I didn't care about the landing, because I was so sure he would catch me. We got married on a spring afternoon in his mother's garden. I wore my grandmother's pearls in a dress that cost more than I made in a month. And when I walked down that aisle toward him, I remember thinking that all my struggles had been worth it. Every ramen noodle dinner in my cramped apartment, every rejection from design firms, every night I cried myself to sleep, wondering if I would ever be enough. It all led me here, to this moment, to this man. He cried when he saw me. Did you know that? He stood at the altar, and tears streamed down his face, and I thought it was because he loved me so much he couldn't contain it. Now I wonder if he was crying because he knew what he was. I wonder if somewhere deep inside he was mourning the man he could have been, the man who could have loved me the way I deserved to be loved. but I'm getting ahead of myself. The first few years were good. They were better than good. They were everything I had ever dreamed of. We bought a house in the suburbs with a big backyard and a kitchen with marble countertops. I started my own interior design business, working from home so I could be there when our children came. And they did come. First Emma, with her father's dark hair and my mother's eyes. And then, 2 years later, Michael, who had my stubborn chin and Daniel's quiet intensity. I loved being a mother. I loved it in a way that surprised me. This fierce and overwhelming love that made me cry when I watched them sleep. I would stand in the doorway of their rooms and marvel at what we had created. These perfect little humans who trusted me completely, who looked at me like I had hung the moon in the stars. And I loved Daniel. God, how I loved him. I loved the way he came home from work and scooped the kids up in his arms. I loved the way he kissed my forehead when he thought I was sleeping. I loved Sunday mornings when we would all pile into our bed with pancakes and cartoons, and I would look around at my family and think, this is it. This is everything. We had traditions. We had inside jokes. We had a secret language that only we understood, built from years of shared experiences and whispered conversations in the dark. He would bring me coffee in bed every Saturday morning, just the way I liked it, 2 sugars, a splash of cream, and I would make his mother's recipe for pot roast every Sunday night. We were happy. At least, I thought we were happy. But happiness built on sand doesn't last, and I didn't realize until much later that while I was building our life with bricks and mortar and love, Daniel was standing on a foundation that was already starting to crack. The signs were there. Of course they were there. They're always there, aren't they? We just choose not to see them, because seeing them would mean acknowledging that our entire life is a lie. The first sign was the phone. Daniel had always been attached to his phone. He was a businessman, after all, always closing deals and managing accounts and doing whatever it was that brought home the paycheck that paid for our comfortable life. But somewhere along the way, his relationship with that phone changed. It went from a tool to a lifeline, something he couldn't put down, something he guarded, like a dragon guarding gold. I noticed it at dinner one night, about 3 years before that anniversary. We were eating the pot roast I had made. The kids were arguing about something trivial, and Daniel's phone buzzed on the table. He grabbed it so fast, he knocked over his water glass. And when I asked who it was, he said, "Just work," without meeting my eyes. Just work. That phrase would come to haunt me. I started paying attention after that. I noticed how he would take calls in another room with the door closed. I noticed how he would smile at his screen in a way he hadn't smiled at me in years. I noticed how he started working late more often, coming home smelling like expensive perfume that wasn't mine. But I didn't say anything. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was letting my insecurities get the best of me. Daniel loved me. Daniel had chosen me. Daniel would never betray me like that. I was such a fool. And then there were the kids, my beautiful children, the lights of my life, the reason I got up every morning. They started to change too. It was subtle at first, so subtle I almost missed it. But mothers notice things. Mothers feel the shift in the air before the storm arrives. Emma was 13 when she started pulling away. 13 is a difficult age. I know that. Hormones and peer pressure, and the desperate need to fit in. I remembered it all from my own adolescence. But this felt different. This felt like more than teenage angst. She stopped wanting to spend time with me. She stopped telling me about her day. She would come home from school, go straight to her room, and close the door. And when I knocked to ask if she wanted a snack or help with homework, she would say, "I'm fine, Mom," in a voice that told me I was anything but welcome. I tried to connect with her. I really did. I suggested shopping trips and movie nights and spa days, all the things we used to love doing together. But she always had an excuse. She was too busy. She had plans with friends. She didn't feel like it. And then there was the way she looked at me, my sweet little girl, who used to crawl into my lap and tell me I was the best mommy in the whole wide world. She started looking at me like I was a stranger, worse than a stranger, like I was someone to be pitied or perhaps tolerated. I caught her once, whispering to her father in the kitchen. They stopped the moment I walked in, both of them wearing identical expressions of guilt. And when I asked what they were talking about, Daniel said, "Nothing, just work stuff. Nothing, just work stuff." The lies were piling up like snow, covering everything I thought I knew until I couldn't find my way home anymore. Michael was different. My son, who had always been a mama's boy, who had followed me around the house like a puppy and declared at age 5 that he was going to marry me when he grew up. He became cold, distant. His hugs felt perfunctory, like obligations rather than expressions of love. His "I love you, Mom" started sounding hollow, rehearsed, like lines in a play, and the secrets. There were so many secrets now, buzzing through our house like invisible insects, landing on conversations and poisoning them with silence. I would walk into a room and everyone would stop talking. I would ask a simple question and get vague, evasive answers. I would suggest family activities and be met with excuses and eye rolls and the distinct impression that my presence was no longer wanted. One night, I heard them laughing downstairs. Daniel, Emma, Michael, my whole family, gathered together without me. The sound of their laughter should have been beautiful. Instead, it felt like a knife twisting in my chest because they were laughing the way they used to laugh with me before whatever this was started. I crept to the top of the stairs and listened, straining to hear what was so funny, what joke I was being excluded from. And then I heard my name. "Mom would never understand," Emma was saying. "She's so oblivious." "She means well," Daniel replied. But there was something in his voice, condescension, maybe, or pity, that made my blood run cold. "She's embarrassing," Michael added, and the others laughed again, and I had to press my hand over my mouth to keep from crying out. Oblivious, embarrassing. These were the words my family used to describe me when they thought I couldn't hear. I went back to my room and lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, until Daniel came up hours later. He didn't reach for me. He didn't kiss me goodnight. He just turned his back and fell asleep. And while I lay beside him, feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my life, I started investigating. I'm not proud of it. Wives aren't supposed to spy on their husbands, to sneak through their belongings like criminals looking for evidence. But what choice did I have? My family was slipping away from me, and no one would tell me why. I checked his phone when he was in the shower. The screen locked before I could read the message, but I saw a name flash across it. Melissa, and a single word that made my stomach lurch. Tonight, Melissa. I didn't know any Melissa. He had never mentioned a Melissa at work. Who was Melissa, and why were they texting about tonight? I found receipts in his jacket pockets. Dinners at restaurants I had never been to. Hotel rooms in the next town over. Jewelry purchases that never found their way to my jewelry box. The evidence mounted and mounted, but still, I refused to see what was right in front of my face, because seeing it would mean the end. Seeing it would mean that my perfect life, my perfect marriage, my perfect family, it was all a carefully constructed illusion, and I was the only one who didn't know the truth. The money started disappearing about 6 months before our anniversary. I had always handled the household finances, paying bills, managing the budget, making sure we had enough for emergencies and vacations and the kids' college funds. It was one of the ways I contributed, one of the ways I made myself useful. But Daniel controlled the main accounts, the ones where his paychecks were deposited, and I trusted him to transfer what we needed each month, until the transfers started getting smaller. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I called the bank, assuming there had been some kind of error, but they assured me everything was in order. The deposits were correct. It was the transfers that had changed. I asked Daniel about it that night at dinner. I kept my voice light, casual, like I was just curious and not terrified of what his answer might be. "Oh, there have been some extra expenses at work," he said, not looking up from his plate. "Client dinners, travel costs. You know how it is." I didn't know how it was. I had never known, because he had never told me. But I nodded and smiled and pretended to believe him, even as something inside me cracked a little more. The money kept disappearing. Thousands of dollars gone without explanation. I started checking the accounts obsessively, watching the numbers dwindle like sand through an hourglass. And every time I asked about it, Daniel had another excuse ready. A new suit for an important meeting, a golf club membership that was crucial for networking, repairs to his car that he had forgotten to mention. The lies came so easily, so smoothly, that I started to wonder if he had always been this good at lying, or if it was a skill he had developed specifically for me. The family vacations stopped including me. It happened gradually, so gradually I almost didn't notice. Daniel would take the kids to visit his mother for a weekend, and I would stay home because someone needed to take care of the house. He would take them to amusement parks and beach trips and ski vacations. And I would stay home because I had a deadline for work, or because I wasn't feeling well, or because of some other excuse that sounded reasonable at the time, but added up to a pattern of exclusion. And then there was the trip to Hawaii. I found out about it by accident. I was doing laundry, sorting through Michael's backpack, when I found a brochure for a resort in Maui. Not just any resort, one of those luxury places with private bungalows and infinity pools and prices that made my eyes water. I showed it to Daniel that night, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's this?" He barely glanced at it. "Oh, just something from work, a team-building retreat they're planning." It was in Michael's backpack. A flicker of something crossed his face. Annoyance, maybe, or the brief panic of a liar caught off guard. He must have grabbed it from my office when he visited. You know how kids are, always picking things up. But Michael hadn't visited Daniel's office in months. I knew that because I kept track of those things, kept track of every small moment our family shared, hoarding them like treasure because they had become so rare. I said nothing. I smiled and nodded and tucked the brochure into a drawer where I could look at it later, where I could torture myself with evidence of secrets I wasn't supposed to know. A week later, Daniel announced that he had to go on a business trip. Just a few days, he said. I'll be back before you know it. He took the kids with him, both of them, out of school for a week because this business trip required his children's presence for some reason that was never explained. They came back tan and happy and full of stories they wouldn't share with me. Every time I asked about the trip, they changed the subject. Every time I pressed for details, they gave me vague answers that contradicted each other. They had gone to Hawaii. My family had taken a vacation to paradise, and they had left me behind without a second thought. I found the photos on Emma's phone, the 4 of them, Daniel, Emma, Michael, and a woman I didn't recognize, standing on a beach at sunset, arms around each other, smiling like they were the happiest family in the world, the happiest family that didn't include me. I should have confronted them then. I know that now. I should have screamed and demanded answers and refused to let them gaslight me into believing I was imagining things. But I was scared. I was so scared of what the truth might be, of what it would mean for my life, for my children, for everything I had worked so hard to build. So I stayed silent. I watched and waited and gathered evidence like a detective building a case against her own family. I documented the lies, the absences, the moments of whispered conversations that stopped when I entered a room. I became a ghost in my own home, observing, but never participating, always on the outside looking in. And I started to understand something that broke my heart into pieces so small, I wasn't sure they could ever be put back together. My family didn't love me anymore. Maybe they never had. Our anniversary was approaching. 15 years together, 15 years of marriage, 15 years that I had thought meant something. I decided to suggest a special dinner. Something romantic and intimate. Something that might remind us both of who we used to be before everything went wrong. Daniel agreed, which surprised me. He had been so distant lately, so preoccupied with whatever secret life he was living behind my back. But he said yes, even smiled when he said it. And for one foolish moment, I let myself hope. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe this dinner could be a turning point, a chance to reconnect, a way to bring my husband back to me. Maybe all those fears and suspicions were just the paranoid imaginings of a woman who had forgotten how to trust. I went shopping for a new dress, something beautiful, something that would make him see me again, really see me the way he used to. I found a deep burgundy number that hugged my curves and made my eyes look brighter. I got my hair done, my nails done, put on makeup for the first time in months. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman who still had something to offer, a woman who deserved to be loved. Daniel barely glanced at me when I came downstairs. "Ready?" he said, already heading for the door. No compliment, no appreciation, no acknowledgement of the effort I had made. But I pushed down my disappointment and followed him to the car, still clinging to that stupid, stubborn hope. The restaurant was beautiful. White tablecloths, candles, soft music playing in the background. The kind of place we used to go before the kids were born, back when we were young and in love, and the future stretched out before us like an endless possibility. We ordered wine, an expensive bottle that Daniel chose without consulting me, and I tried to make conversation. I asked about his work, his friends, his plans for the summer. He answered in monosyllables, checking his phone every few minutes, clearly wishing he was somewhere else. And then the waitress arrived. She was young, probably not much older than Emma, pretty in that effortless way that I had never quite managed, with long, dark hair and a smile that could light up a room. She looked at Daniel like she recognized him, and something cold settled in my stomach. "Are you celebrating something special tonight?" she asked, her eyes still on my husband. I opened my mouth to answer, to tell her about our anniversary, to stake my claim on this man who was supposed to be mine. But before I could speak, Daniel smiled at her, really smiled, the way he used to smile at me, and said those 5 devastating words. "She's just my nanny, just my nanny." The world stopped. The music faded. The candles flickered and dimmed until all I could see was my husband's face, looking at me with something that might have been contempt or might have been indifference, and I wasn't sure which was worse. The waitress looked confused. "Oh, I'm sorry. I thought—" "Don't worry about it," Daniel said smoothly. "Just bring us another bottle of wine, would you?" She hurried away, and I sat there in my beautiful burgundy dress, feeling like the biggest fool in the world. I didn't cry. I wanted to. God, how I wanted to. But something had hardened inside me in that moment, something that refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. Instead, I looked at my husband, really looked at him, and I saw him clearly for the first time in years. He wasn't a good man who had made a mistake. He wasn't a loving husband who had lost his way. He was a stranger, wearing the face of someone I used to love. And he had been deceiving me for longer than I could bear to calculate. "Why did you say that?" I asked, my voice perfectly calm. He shrugged. "Say what? You told her I was the nanny." "Did I?" He didn't even have the decency to look guilty. "I don't remember. We've been married for 15 years, Daniel. 15 years. And you introduced me as the nanny. I was making a joke." He rolled his eyes. Actually, rolled his eyes at me, like I was being hysterical. "Can you relax for once? It's not a big deal. Not a big deal. 15 years of my life, erased with a casual lie. And it wasn't a big deal. Something clicked in my brain then. Something final. I realized that I had been holding on to a marriage that had died years ago, refusing to let go because I was afraid of what came next. But sitting here, in this beautiful restaurant, being dismissed and diminished by the man who had promised to love me forever, I understood that there was nothing left to hold on to. There was only the truth, and the truth was going to set me free. I excused myself to use the restroom. I needed a moment alone, a moment to compose myself, a moment to figure out what I was going to do next. But as I walked through the restaurant, I saw something that stopped me cold. Daniel's phone was sitting on the table, screen up, and a message had just come through. From Melissa. I glanced back at Daniel. He was talking to the waitress again, leaning in close, laughing at something she said, and made a decision. I walked back to the table, pretending I had forgotten something, and scooped up his phone in one smooth motion. The screen locked before I could read the message, but I knew his password. I had known it for years, even though he thought he had changed it without telling me. It was his mother's birthday, the same password he had used since we first started dating. Some things never change. I ducked into the bathroom, locked the door, and unlocked his phone with shaking fingers. What I found made everything else seem insignificant. The messages went back months, years even. Melissa wasn't just an affair. She was a whole other life that Daniel had been living behind my back. I scrolled through their conversation, my eyes burning with tears I refused to let fall. "Can't wait to see you tonight," Melissa had written just that morning. "The kids are so excited about the move." The kids, the move. My hands were trembling so badly I almost dropped the phone. But I kept reading, kept torturing myself with truth after horrible truth. There were photos. Melissa with Daniel, their arms around each other. Melissa with my children, posing like they were already a family. Melissa in what looked like a brand new house, standing in front of a sold sign. Daniel beside her, with his arm around her waist. They had bought a house together. My husband and his mistress had purchased a home while I sat in our family house, oblivious, wondering why the money was disappearing. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the conversations about me. "She still doesn't suspect anything," Daniel had written a few weeks ago. "It's almost sad how clueless she is." "Don't feel bad," Melissa replied. "She'll be fine. She's always been good at being nothing. Good at being nothing." That's what my husband's mistress thought of me. That's what my husband thought of me because he never disagreed, never defended me, just laughed it off and changed the subject to their future together. There were discussions about the divorce, about how Daniel would handle me, make sure I got as little as possible, about how Emma and Michael had already agreed to live with him and Melissa, how they couldn't wait to start their real family. My own children, my own flesh and blood. They were choosing this woman over me, and they had been lying to my face for months. I found a group chat. Daniel, Melissa, Emma, and Michael. 4 people planning a future that didn't include me, laughing about my obliviousness, counting down the days until they could leave me behind. Hawaii was amazing, Emma had written after their secret vacation. So glad Mom wasn't there to ruin it. She would have complained the whole time. Michael agreed. Remember that trip to Disney when she made everything about her? I didn't remember making anything about me. I remembered carrying snacks and sunscreen, making sure everyone had water, standing in line for hours so my children could ride the rides they wanted. But that wasn't how they remembered it. That wasn't who they thought I was. I stood in that bathroom for what felt like hours, reading message after message, watching my entire life crumble around me like a sandcastle in a hurricane. When I finally looked up, I didn't recognize the woman in the mirror. She looked older, harder, like someone who had just survived a war. Maybe she had. I took screenshots of everything. Every message, every photo, every damning conversation. I emailed them to myself, then to my sister, then to a new email address I created on the spot. I wasn't going to let them destroy this evidence. I wasn't going to let them control the narrative. And then I walked back to the table, sat down across from my husband, and smiled. "Everything okay?" Daniel asked, not really caring about the answer. "Perfect," I said. "Absolutely perfect." He didn't notice that his phone was in a slightly different position. He didn't notice the way I was looking at him, like a scientist observing a particularly repulsive insect. He didn't notice anything because he had stopped seeing me years ago. The dinner continued. He ordered for both of us without asking what I wanted. He talked about himself, his work, his plans, never mentioning the house he had bought with another woman, the life he was building behind my back. I nodded and smiled and said the right things, playing the role of dutiful wife for the last time. Inside, I was burning. 15 years. I had given this man 15 years of my life, and he had repaid me with lies and betrayal and contempt. He had turned my children against me, stolen my money, destroyed my self-worth, and he thought I was too stupid to figure it out. He thought wrong. The next few weeks were a master class in deception. I played dumb. I pretended to be the same oblivious wife they all thought I was, going about my daily routine like nothing had changed. I made dinner. I did laundry. I smiled at my husband and kissed my children goodnight, even knowing that they were counting down the days until they could leave me. But behind the scenes, I was preparing. I hired a lawyer, the best divorce attorney in the city, recommended by a friend who had gone through her own nightmare separation. I showed her the screenshots, the evidence of Daniel's affairs and financial deception, and watched her eyes widen. "This is substantial," she said. "With this evidence, we can make sure you're protected." Protected. It was such a small word for such a big concept. I had been unprotected for years, vulnerable and exposed, and I hadn't even known it. I opened my own bank account, started slowly transferring small amounts that Daniel wouldn't notice. I made copies of important documents, the deed to our house, our tax returns, the records of every account and investment. I built a case, piece by piece, gathering ammunition for the war I knew was coming, and I started to find myself again. It's strange what betrayal does to you. In some ways, it destroys you. It takes everything you thought you knew and burns it to ash. But in other ways, it sets you free. When the worst has already happened, there's nothing left to fear. I started remembering who I was before Daniel, the ambitious young woman with dreams of building beautiful spaces, the girl who had worked 2 jobs to put herself through college, the fighter who had never given up, never backed down, never let anyone tell her she wasn't enough. I had lost that woman somewhere along the way, buried her beneath the demands of wife and mother and caretaker, but she was still there, underneath all the rubble, and she was angry. She was so angry. The confrontation came on a Sunday night. I had planned it carefully, waited until the children were at their friends' houses, until it was just Daniel and me in this house that had become a tomb. He was in his office, probably texting Melissa, completely unaware of what was about to happen. I walked in without knocking. He looked up, annoyed at the interruption, and I saw him, really saw him. The thinning hair he tried to hide, the paunch that had developed over the years, the lines around his eyes that spoke of late nights and guilty consciences. He wasn't the handsome prince I had married. He was just a man, a small, selfish, pathetic man. "We need to talk," I said. "Can it wait? I'm in the middle of something." "No." I sat down across from him, folded my hands in my lap. "It can't wait." Something in my voice must have alerted him, because he actually put down his phone and looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in years. "What is it?" There was wariness in his voice now, fear, even. "Good. I know about Melissa." The color drained from his face. "I don't know what you're—" "Don't." My voice was sharp, cutting through his lie before he could finish it. "Don't insult my intelligence. I've read the messages. I've seen the photos. I know about the house, the money, the trips. I know everything." Silence. He stared at me like I had grown a second head, like the furniture had suddenly started speaking. The oblivious wife he had dismissed for so long was finally showing her teeth, and he didn't know how to respond. "How long?" I asked. "How long have you been lying to me?" He opened his mouth, closed it again. Finally, quietly, 3 years. 3 years. Nearly a quarter of our marriage had been a complete lie. And the children? He had the decency to look away. "They've known for about a year." A year. My babies had been lying to me for an entire year, had been planning to abandon me for an entire year, and I had been too blind to see it. "They love Melissa," Daniel said, and I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. "She makes them happy. And I don't? You're their mother. Of course they love you. But you're so—" He searched for the word. "Boring. Safe. Melissa is fun. She takes them places, buys them things, lets them do whatever they want. You're always worrying, always nagging, always trying to control everything. Worrying, nagging, controlling." These were the words he used to describe a mother's love, a mother's concern, a mother's desperate attempt to keep her children safe. "I was raising them," I said quietly. "I was trying to raise good people. I'm sorry if that was boring for you." He had no response to that. He just sat there, looking at me with something that might have been guilt or might have been relief that the secret was finally out. "I want a divorce," I said. "Fine. No argument, no plea for another chance, no apology. Just fine. Like our marriage was a business arrangement that had run its course. And I want the house. I want my fair share of the assets. I want you to know that I will fight for everything I deserve, and I have evidence that'll make sure I get it." Now he looks scared. "What evidence?" "All of it. Every message, every photo, every financial record. My lawyer already has copies. So does my family. If you try to cheat me, try to hide assets, or turn this into some kind of battle, I will destroy you." I had never spoken to him like this. I had never spoken to anyone like this. But something had shifted inside me. Some fundamental change that made me capable of fighting back. "The kids want to live with me," he said, trying to regain some control. "I know. I've read that too." My voice was steady, even though my heart was breaking. "They can make that choice. They're old enough, but they will know the truth. They will know what you did, what you all did, and they will have to live with that for the rest of their lives. The divorce was brutal. Daniel tried to fight, of course. He tried to hide assets, tried to paint me as the villain, tried to turn everyone against me. But I had the evidence, and the evidence didn't lie. My lawyer was relentless. She found bank accounts I never knew existed, investments Daniel had hidden in other names, property he had purchased with Melissa. She made sure I got everything I was entitled to. The house, a substantial settlement, enough to start over and build a new life. Emma and Michael chose to live with their father. I won't pretend that didn't devastate me. They were my children, the humans I had created and nurtured and loved with every fiber of my being. And they chose the man who had betrayed their mother over the woman who had given them life. But I couldn't force them to love me. I couldn't force them to see me as anything other than the boring mother they were so eager to escape. All I could do was leave the door open, let them know I would always be there if they needed me, and try to build a life that proved their father wrong. I was not boring. I was not safe. I was not nothing. I was a survivor. The first year alone was hard. I won't lie about that. There were nights when I cried until I couldn't breathe, when the silence of the empty house pressed down on me like a weight I couldn't lift. There were moments when I looked at old photos and wondered where everything went wrong, what I could have done differently, how I could have saved my family. But slowly, gradually, I started to heal. I threw myself into my work. Interior design had always been my passion, and now I had nothing but time to pursue it. I took on projects I would have refused before, when I was too busy being a wife and mother to be myself. I designed beautiful spaces for beautiful people, and I remembered why I had fallen in love with this career in the first place. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during my marriage, women who welcomed me back with open arms and listened to my story without judgment. I discovered that I wasn't alone, that so many of us had been through similar betrayals, similar devastations, similar journeys back to ourselves. I started therapy. I unpacked all the years of diminishment, of being made to feel small and unimportant, of accepting less than I deserved because I didn't know I deserved more. It was painful work, excavating all those buried wounds, but it was necessary. I couldn't build a new life on the ruins of the old one without first clearing away the debris. Emma called me about 6 months after the divorce. I almost didn't answer. I had spent so many nights grieving the loss of my daughter, the girl who had once thought I hung the moon and now couldn't wait to get away from me. But something made me pick up the phone. Some stubborn hope that refused to die. "Mom," her voice was small, uncertain. "Can we talk?" We met for coffee at a place neither of us had ever been. Neutral ground for a conversation neither of us knew how to have. She looked older, I thought, more tired. The sparkle I remembered from her childhood had dimmed, replaced by something that looked uncomfortably like disillusionment. "Dad and Melissa are fighting a lot," she said, staring into her cup. "It's not like I thought it would be." "I'm sorry to hear that." "She's not." Emma hesitated. "She's not as nice as she used to be. She doesn't want to do fun stuff anymore. She just wants Dad to herself, and she gets annoyed when Michael and I are around." I could have said I told you so. I could have pointed out that the woman who helped destroy a family might not be the best foundation for a new one, but I didn't. I just listened. "I miss you, Mom." The words came out in a rush, like she had been holding them in for too long. I miss how things used to be, before everything got so messed up. I reached across the table and took her hand. "I miss you too, sweetheart. More than you could possibly know. I'm sorry." She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry for everything. The things I said, the way I treated you, the lies. I know." I squeezed her hand. "I forgive you." And I meant it, because that's what mothers do. We forgive, even when it breaks us. We leave the door open, even when we're terrified of being hurt again. We love, even when that love has been thrown back in our faces. Michael came back more slowly. His pride, perhaps, or his closer relationship with his father. But eventually, he too reached out, and we began the long process of rebuilding something from the ashes of what we had lost. They never came back to live with me. They were older now, starting their own lives, and the damage that had been done couldn't be fully repaired. But we found a new kind of relationship, one built on honesty and second chances, and the understanding that family isn't just about biology. It's about choice. They chose me again, slowly, painfully, imperfectly, but they chose me. Daniel and Melissa got married about a year after the divorce. I heard about it through the kids, who attended the ceremony with obvious reluctance. It didn't last. Within 2 years, Melissa had left him for someone else. Someone younger, richer, more exciting. Daniel found himself alone in that big new house, wondering what had happened to all his carefully laid plans. I felt nothing when I heard the news. No satisfaction, no vindication, not even pity. He was just a chapter in my story that had ended, a lesson I had learned the hard way. I had more important things to focus on now. I'm telling you this story, not for sympathy and not for revenge. I'm telling you because I want you to know that you can survive the unsurvivable. I was a woman who had everything: a husband, children, a beautiful home, a life that looked perfect from the outside. And then I lost it all. I lost it in the most brutal, humiliating, devastating way possible. I was dismissed and diminished and discarded by the people who were supposed to love me most. But I survived. More than survived. I thrived. I built a new life, a better life, one that was truly mine. I discovered who I was outside of the roles I had played for so long. I learned to stand on my own, to value myself, to refuse to accept treatment that was less than I deserved. And I learned the most important lesson of all, that betrayal doesn't define you. It reveals who others truly are, but it doesn't dictate who you become. You get to choose that. You get to decide whether to be a victim or a survivor, whether to let the pain destroy you or transform you. I chose transformation. I chose myself. For the first time in my life, I chose myself. Sometimes, I still think about that anniversary dinner, about the white tablecloth and the flickering candles and the beautiful young waitress who witnessed my humiliation, about those 5 words that changed everything. "She's just my nanny." My husband said those words to erase me. He said them to diminish me, to make me invisible, to reduce me to something less than I was. He thought he was putting me in my place. But he was wrong. Those words didn't erase me. They woke me up. They shattered the illusion I had been living in and forced me to see the truth. They gave me the gift of clarity, even though it came wrapped in betrayal. I'm not just a nanny. I'm not just a wife or a mother or a housekeeper or any of the other roles I played for 15 years. I am a woman of strength and resilience and worth. I am someone who survived the ultimate betrayal and came out the other side, not broken, but stronger. And that's something my husband never saw. That's something he was never capable of understanding. He looked at me and saw a supporting character in his story, someone to be used and discarded when she was no longer useful. But I was never a supporting character. I was the hero of my own story all along. I just had to lose everything to finally see it. So this is my message to anyone who has been where I was, to anyone whose partner has made them feel invisible, worthless, less than human, to anyone whose family has turned against them, whose children have chosen someone else, whose entire world has crumbled around them. You are not nothing. You are not boring. You are not the sum of someone else's opinion of you. You are worthy of love and respect and honesty. You deserve someone who sees you, who values you, who treats you like the miraculous human being you are. And if you don't have that, if you're trapped in a relationship or a family that makes you feel small, you have the power to change it. It won't be easy. It will be the hardest thing you ever do. There will be days when you want to give up, when the pain feels unbearable, when you wonder if survival is even worth it. But it is. I promise you, it is. Because on the other side of that pain is freedom. On the other side of that betrayal is a chance to finally, truly know yourself. On the other side of that devastation is a life that belongs entirely to you, and that life is worth fighting for. I'm sitting in my own living room now, in a house I bought with my own money, decorated with my own hands. The evening light is coming through the windows, painting everything in gold. My phone has just buzzed with a message from Emma, asking if she can come over for dinner tomorrow. Michael texted earlier to share a photo of his new apartment. He's finally moved out on his own, and he wanted me to see it before anyone else. My children are not perfect. Our relationship is not what it once was. Or rather, it's not what I imagined it was, back when I was too naive to see the truth. But they're here. They're in my life. They chose to come back, and so did I. I chose to come back to myself. I chose to rebuild, to rise from the ashes of my destroyed marriage like a phoenix taking flight. I chose to believe that I was worth saving, even when the people closest to me said otherwise. That anniversary dinner was supposed to be the end of my story. My husband thought he was signing my death certificate with those 5 cruel words, but he was wrong. It wasn't the end. It was the beginning of me, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Sometimes the people you love the most become the ones who destroy you. But destruction is not the end. It's just a doorway to something new. I walked through that door. I left behind the woman who accepted crumbs and called them a feast. I left behind the wife who pretended not to see because seeing was too painful. I left behind the mother who martyred herself on the altar of family, never realizing she was the only one making sacrifices. I didn't lose a family. I walked away from people who never valued me. Betrayal doesn't break you. It teaches you who never deserved your heart. My heart is mine now. It's scarred and battered and imperfect. But it's mine, and I will never, ever give it to someone who doesn't understand its worth. This is my story. This is my survival. This is my triumph. And it started with 5 words at an anniversary dinner, spoken by a man who thought he knew me. He didn't know me at all. But now, finally, I do.